Tom Slater is here, editor of Spiked Online. Can we just start just by going back to Armistice Day and that 2-minute silence, although most of it was with that wonderful, the bugle, that does it for me every time. Absolute goosebumps. And knowing that I'm on air, not being able to sort of, I suppose, let emotion get you, but every time. Do you think that it's a real worry that a lot of people don't feel that?
There's certainly, every year there's a discussion about if people in general or younger people in particular are sort of losing the sense of what remembrance means, what it's supposed to mark. But
also what they're willing to do themselves. Those polls that say that most young people wouldn't be prepared to fight for their country.
Exactly, and I think what things like Remembrance Day are supposed to do is to provide a sense of history in terms of what we owe to previous generations, not just with the First World War but with conflicts since, people laying down their lives for this country, but also to create that kind of sense of continuity with the present. There are values of courage, of self-sacrifice, of patriotism that one should want to aspire to. So it's probably not a surprise that more and more young people are left a little bit cold by things like Remembrance Day when you have a sense of all of those values being quite undermined.
Well, also, if you think about what people are taught at school, I know a lot of schools do these events at school, but if you're told that your country is terrible and that your history of your country is awful and it's built on racism and slavery and exploitation, and the world hates us and should hate us, and we're responsible for every evil in the world, including the Industrial Revolution and climate change and all. Why would you think your country was worth dying for? I mean, no, I don't want anyone to die for their country. I don't want anyone to have to die for their country. But I'm more and more aware of the need that you need to have the level of military and the willingness and ability to use that military that will actually then put off any aggressors to protect yourself and your allies, whether that's Ukraine, whether that's Israel, whether that's Taiwan, whether it's Latvia and Estonia in NATO, but also for ourselves, the willingness to say, no, we are willing and able to use force if necessary. We don't want to do it, but we will do it if we have to, and that there will be a unity and a coming together of the country. I like to think that in the event of that crisis, which I think will be in my lifetime, that we would come together.
And I think it's also partly about the times in which we live, not only because you've had
soft times.
Exactly, and in some ways that's something to be celebrated. The fact that there haven't had to be such serious conflicts or a genuine kind of threat to the territorial integrity of the UK that people were conscripted or having to do national service. That is a great thing that there's been a few generations now to whom that would be a very distant prospect. And I also think because of the fact that many of the wars that we have been engaged in recent years have, broadly speaking, kind of been wars of choice to one degree or another.
Not of survival.
Yeah, wars as a form of foreign policy. And therefore there has been this lack of appreciation of what happens when the chips are really down, what that really means, which is not some abstract concept of militarism. It's not some abstract debate about when force is and isn't necessary.
I want Putin to be running my country?
Exactly. Do you want your family, your community, your town, your city, your culture to be under the thumb of someone who shouldn't have it under their thumbs? That's a very different kettle of fish. And you saw that with a place like Ukraine, a place that was quite divided in many ways, that did have genuine concerns that would people fight. But as soon as someone rolls into your town with tanks, it's a very different kettle of fish to the kinds of discussions might one be having before something like that happens.
Absolutely. Well, isn't there that was saying, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. This cycle, we are very much in the times where life has been good, weaker men, and here we are, and we're going to be creating some very, very difficult times. Donald Trump creating a difficult time for the BBC, but let's face it, I mean, they SODDING well deserve it, don't they? But we, as the long-suffering, forced by threat of fine and criminal penalties, sent to prison if you don't pay the fine, taxpayers from the licence fee, if he did sue the BBC for $1 billion, and I'm pretty sure he'd win, I wouldn't win that sort of sum, but we'd end up paying it. So do we want him to be suing it, or do we quite like the fact that actually there is finally some accountability?
Well, I would rather not see £1 billion or anywhere near £1 billion in tax.
$1 billion, since Brexit, that exchange rate's not so bad.
That's a very good point. It's very good. So maybe it won't be so bad. But it's one of those things where I don't want to see public money being used to this end. I do think it will probably be resolved by probably a quite embarrassing apology. They have already apologised, but he probably...
He obviously wants a much more sort of full-throated...
Wants them to properly sort of take the knee, as it were, in a very different sense to what we've been used to. So I think that's probably where this will end up. I hope that's where this will end up. Certainly diplomatically, it would be a problem if you had him actually pursuing this more vigorously. Yeah. But it's a reminder, I mean, it probably did take having a kind of president in the White House that we have had to make so much of a stink about this that heads had to roll. But heads should have rolled anyway. The government should have been insistent that there was a clear out after this came to light. With the internal mechanisms of the BBC should have been sufficiently strong, not quite subject to groupthink, that this didn't happen.
It didn't happen, and if it was found out, people would immediately take action. Well, look, bearing in mind, as I pointed out earlier, the man who is currently acting, interim head of news, taken over from Deborah Turness, is a guy called Jonathan Monroe. And in May, when they had this internal meeting about this crisis over this documentary and the doctoring of this Donald Trump speech on January the 6th ahead of those riots in the Capitol, he said no attempt was made to mislead the audience. I mean, it's just laughable. Exactly, that's the only proper reaction. Yeah. It's laughable that they should have claimed that. So you've got a guy who stepped in after the woman's resigned, who says yesterday on the way into work that there is absolutely, no institutional bias in the country, and you've got his boss still, Tim Davie, still in the job, arrived at work today, is going to address BBC staff, saying that all our staff are wonderful and he supports our staff. These people, as we were saying earlier, they're utterly delusional, but they're dangerous. They are the problem, not the solution.
And the thing is, deep down, I think a lot of people at the BBC will recognise there is a bit of a problem. Like people who
I don't think...
No, but what I mean is they must know that to a man and woman in that organisation, do they really think if you ask them who they're going to vote for at the next election, they would be anywhere close to representative of what the polls currently suggest? It is widely reported by former BBC insiders that the mood after the Brexit referendum was as if they were at a wake.
Oh no, I was in. I love it genuinely. I was in the BBC the day of that result. It was an absolute joy. They looked at me like I was Hitler. No, I'm not joking. I walked through. People were looking. They were broken souls, and they look as I walked through the newsroom. You can imagine the look on this face. I mean, one of the greatest days of my life. That result, and genuinely, they were looking at me like I was Adolf Hitler. Yeah. Because that's what they think Brexiteers are.
But Brexit could have been an opportunity for them to change tack. I remember there was this brief period for about 5 minutes where you'd hear discussions on BBC Radio saying we've got absolutely everything wrong and we need to reassess. I remember Question Time that week where for some reason Dimbleby was stood in the audience for a change rather than on the panel, as if he had to show whose side he was on. It was very, very strange. But then they instantly did a 180, and it was all about they got this wrong, so we've got to move from informing them to indoctrinating them. We can't ever let this happen again.
Exactly.
And at that point, the die was cast. Something like this was going to happen. There was going to be a crisis point. The coverage got terrible, not just on populism, but on trans, on the climate. Everything got a lot worse since then because there was this panic about misinformation and whatnot.
Well, BBC Verify as well. I mean, the laughable BBC Verify. Where have they been all this sodding time?
That was my favourite part in the dossier, actually, was that they pointed out that the first big investigation that BBC Verify did on their own steam.
I'm going to stop drinking my tea because I know you're going to make me spit it out laughing.
Into claims that there was that areas with many ethnic minorities were paying more in car insurance, going to racist car insurance rates, basically. That piece had to be taken down because it was shown to be so woefully inadequate. The data was unusable and unsuitable. They couldn't prove causation. This was their first big investigation, and it had to be completely taken down.
Because it wasn't verifiable.
Not clarified, not tweaked, not we've made a correction. Quite unusual, taken down. And that's BBC Verify.
Yeah,
so that
I mean, they are an absolute joke. I mean, I'm also, didn't Marianne Spring, didn't the woman who was the head of BBC Verify, did she not lie on her CV?
She's alleged to have lied on the CV.
I believe the woman who she handed the CV to was very clear that she had lied on her CV.
Yes, so she was certainly spreading misinformation about herself.
I mean, sacking offence instantly. You lied on your CV to get a job.
It's not great.
They find out 20 years later they can sack you for gross misconduct that moment. I'm sorry, it's utter madness, isn't it? Look, I mean, there's talk about the White House mulling a BBC reporter ban. Because the BBC staff in America are like, this is going to be a nightmare. I don't like presidents choosing who are coming in. I don't like it. Not acceptable to me. I don't like, I don't like reporters sitting there and allowing Donald Trump to castigate another reporter and not going, no, I give my question to him each time. That's what I mean. I don't like that. But we know it's all mad. We know they're not up to dealing with it. But Donald Trump, he's talking, you know, criticising the BBC. But Keir Starmer, he's been remarkably quiet. I'm assuming we're going to hear from him. I mean, assuming he's here on Wednesday, we'll be doing PMQs on Wednesday. But he's ducked demands to ditch the licence fee. He's rallied behind the BBC. He says it's stronger than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's not. We've got Ed Davie and Keir Starmer as supporting it. But I think what's amazing is talking about the runners and riders who can replace the Director General of the BBC. And we've all been told, oh, well, you know, Tim Davie is a Tory. It's like, I mean, I talked on the show yesterday about my run-in with him in the summer, and I was I'm going to go with disappointed in him. Again, I don't want someone who represents my political views. I don't. That's not what the BBC should do.
Good at the job.
And the fact that you've got, you know, Kemi Badenoch, who does not just throw things out. She's a very considered thinker on a lot of things. And Nigel Farage and others being very critical of the BBC and its political allegiances. And you've got, you know, Labour largely defending it and the Lib Dems. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But the runners and riders, 8 people the Sky News have listed today who could replace Tim Davie. Charlotte Moore, she was at the BBC as Chief Content Officer for 5 years. No. James Harding, he's a former editor of The Times and a former director of BBC News, and now owns News Venture Tortoise Media, who own the Observer newspaper. No. Jay Hunt, she's a former... she's Apple TV Plus's creative director for Europe. I mean, if you've seen Apple TV, got a question on that. But of course, she was director of programmes at, you know, a chief creative officer at Channel 4. No. Alex Mann, she's done various different jobs, but, you know, she was, you know, she's been a big figure, but she'd been involved in founding Channel 4. Dame Carolyn McCall, she's at ITV. Again, you know, Dame Woke is her nickname. Trevor Phillips, I've got a lot of time for Trevor. He's at Sky News now, but again, I do worry he's gone a little bit Sky Woke native, having gone to Sky, having been someone who's been very brave in speaking out against a lot of woke madness on the left. But he's a staunch Labour guy, you know, Labour through and through. And I just think, no, I think it needs to be someone who has not worked at any of these organisations, not for 1 minute.
It's a bit like when you need to do an inquiry and people are worried that someone has too much
grooming gags and you were a police officer. Yeah,
because in a way that's what needs to happen at the BBC. Is you need someone who's an outsider who isn't coming to it with any predisposition.
Yeah, and doesn't go to dinner parties with any of the people involved.
Yeah, exactly. And also because you want to deflect. I think this is part of the problem, is that when certainly the Conservatives were trying to push back against the wokeification of the BBC. When Robbie Gibb was appointed to the BBC board, this former Tory communications director who has since become the kind of panto villain of the pro-BBC lot. I mean, if he has been doing a right-wing coup, it's not been going particularly well.
He's been rubbish at it. He's as bad at that as like Israel is at genocide.
But I think arguably it does also, even if he was being, excuse me, as careful as possible, it lends ammunition to the other side to say, oh, but actually if there is bias at the BBC, it's in the other direction because of people like Robbie Gibb.
It's just...
You need an outsider, someone who just gets what the issues is, gets how important it is that impartiality is felt for maybe not everyone, but at least most people.
Do you know who I'd like? Andrew Neil.
Interesting.
But again, loads of people at the BBC would hate him.
No, exactly. Right of centre.
Yeah.
You know,
oh no, he says he's not. He says, you know, he's been, you know,
Murdoch man originally. Even that would be thrown at him. That's the problem.
Oh yeah, exactly. We talked a little bit earlier about Rachel Reeves and benefits and unemployment and the like. But there's another big story, obviously big brewing story. Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, he's asking David Lammy today about the prison security crisis and all these inmates just accidentally released. And he's put out a letter yesterday. Look, I've written to you. I'm giving you 24 hours notice. Justice questions today. And after that appallingly poor performance at Prime Minister's questions, standing in for Never Hear Keir, David Lammy said, you've got advance notice. You should know how many people have been wrongly set free, and how whether they're still free, and whether they were serious criminals, violent or sex criminals. This is brewing, is it not? Alongside, of course, the immigration crisis, which is something that Robert Jenrick's talked about a lot as well. He's a former Home Office Minister, with the second migrant doing the old hokey cokey, getting coming here, getting deported to France, coming back here, then getting sent back to France. We're told he came back on Sunday and he's going to be deported. But I mean, it's not looking good. It's
not looking good. As you say, the one in, one out system, I didn't realise it was the same person who's coming in and coming out, but that's apparently what it's turned out to be.
And we're still I think under 100 people have been got rid of. Yeah. I mean, we get 1,000 a day sometimes.
It's just pointless. I mean, it was, but it's a proof of concept, as Keir Starmer likes to say. It's proof that the concept doesn't work. With David Lammy, I think these questions are going to be interesting, because if anyone's seen his performance on Celebrity Mastermind many years ago, he's not a details man.
This is why I've never done any of these shows.
I would probably
I've been asked
like
to do 3 times. I've been asked to University Challenge 3 times, and I've always said it. No.
I would terrify myself. In fairness, I don't think I would do a David Lammy and say that red Leicester was a type of blue cheese.
Good.
Probably wouldn't go that far.
You might perhaps know that Henry VII did not inherit the throne from Henry VIII.
Exactly. So
you might know basics.
He might struggle with even these questions. But the thing is, prisoners being accidentally released has actually been going on for quite some time. It's shot up.
It did. It doubled under Labour.
Exactly. So it is worth pointing that out. But I think the problem is now that the media have realised it, you're just going to have a daily drip of these stories. It was like when the mainstream media certainly finally recognised that not everyone who's coming on those boats were asylum seekers looking for a better life. And then suddenly you've got this...
That's an outrageous thing to say. I'm reporting you to Ofcom.
And I'm sure they'll uphold it. But it's one of those things where this is going to be a constant headache for David Lammy now. And is he fleet-foot enough to
That said, and again, I try and be even-handed on these things, is that they are still dealing with a crisis. 14 years of Tory rule where they cut spending on criminal... You cannot do criminal justice on the cheap. A lot of us were saying that a long time ago. And, austerity... But then what choice did they have? They had to cut something when we had austerity after the crash. So, I mean, each government can blame the last one. But again, none of that flies for voters anymore. We need you to do the job properly. Don't worry, they're going to put our taxes up to pay for it all. Just finally, I want to talk about the Olympic Committee. It emerged yesterday on the show. We didn't get a chance to talk about it. We're going to be talking to the brilliant, the wonderful Sharon Davies about this, a former Olympian herself. They're set to ban. I love the headlines. The headline I got given yesterday, the Telegraph, someone handed it to me, was that trans women are going to be banned from female sport. It's like, no, trans-identifying men, so men are going to be banned from women's sport. If I look back 20 years, the idea that that would be a headline in serious news, we're going to ban men from women's sport. Like, well, yeah, because they're men. Why was this allowed to happen in the first place? But this is all down to Donald Trump. He made it really clear. No, if you are trans-identified but you're actually not a woman, and we're not using female and male. I'm a woman. I own the word woman. I don't have to be called female. I'm not female. I don't know. Chicken or something. I'm trying to think of an animal. I was going to say dog, and I know what you're all going to say. No, but we use the word women, and then we allowed trans people to take that word from us. No, women. But it's because he basically said, no, if you're applying for a visa to come to the Olympics when it's in LA and you're competing in a women's sport but you're male, you ain't going to get your visa. Yeah. So he's kind of pushed this issue. And again, thank you very much, Donald Trump.
Yeah, sometimes it takes someone in a position of government to actually govern, to actually throw the weight around a little bit for these things to go, because I really don't think that there's people who are working in the whole kind of structure of the IOC and the Olympics. I'm sure a lot of them either couldn't care either way, haven't thought about this that much, or are implacably against it. But as is often the case, they are just in hock to the most shrill activists amongst them. Yep. They're terrified of media scrutiny, and I think when given an out to say we have to do this, they willingly took it. Yeah. But it's tremendously significant. It's a vindication and a long-running reward for the people who've been campaigning so hard on this.
The Martina Navratilova and Sharon Davies and others. Also, it will be really nice at the Olympics. We're not going to have 1 billion people able to watch a man punch a woman in the face and pretend that it's a sport.
And pretend that that's a progressive development.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, that was, I think, the key moment that we're like, yeah, maybe this isn't acceptable.
But it's also how depressing how long it takes to bring us back to just normality and common sense.
Yeah.
It's not like we've even pushed forward, it's that we've just brought it back to where it should be.
We're going to go back to sanity, exactly.